Pick the human, Queen Valerathane said, and 300 Aurelian nobles laughed as if she had just told the finest joke in the galaxy. Ethan Cole did not. He stood near the rear doors of the Crystal Hall in a plain black security uniform, 34 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, and painfully ordinary beside the towering royal guards arranged beneath the blue-white chandeliers. Their ceremonial armor shimmered like polished ice. Ethan's only decoration was a small Terran security badge clipped above his heart. The palace around him hummed with quiet machinery. Climate vents whispered beneath the marble floor. Anti-surveillance fields produced a faint pressure behind his ears. Somewhere beyond the 40-foot windows, diplomatic shuttles crossed the violet evening sky above Aurelia Prime. Queen Valyra sat at the far end of the chamber beneath a suspended ring of crystalline light, her cyan skin reflecting its glow, silver eyes carrying the calm boredom of someone who had endured too many ceremonies. Tomorrow she would sign the first permanent defense treaty between the Aurelian Dominion and Earth. Tonight tradition required her to select an honorary personal protector. The obvious choices stood before her: decorated commanders, palace veterans, warriors whose families had guarded Aurelian royalty for generations. Instead, Valyra had looked past all of them and pointed directly at Ethan. "Your Majesty," Chancellor Sereth said carefully, "Mr. Cole is merely the Terran security liaison." "I am aware." A hint of amusement touched her voice. "Humans insist they are unusually capable under pressure. I find myself curious." Another ripple of laughter moved through the hall. Ethan could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward him. He stepped forward. His shoes clicked softly against the glass-like floor. "Understood, Your Majesty." That was all. Valyra's silver eyes narrowed slightly. Perhaps she had expected embarrassment. Perhaps a protest. Ethan gave her neither. He had spent 12 years learning that embarrassment never stopped a threat, and pride never opened an emergency exit. While the court enjoyed its joke, he studied the room. 12 visible doors for concealed security alcoves, 24 royal guards, 2 elevated balconies, 1 maintenance drone drifting near the eastern ceiling. He checked the cameras next. 7 covered the central chamber. 6 were aligned correctly. The 7th was not. Ethan's expression remained still. Camera 7 pointed roughly 4 degrees away from its assigned field, leaving a narrow blind spot beside the diplomatic gallery. Could have been maintenance. Could have been nothing. Then he noticed the champagne. A servant passed carrying a silver tray, and the pale liquid inside the crystal glasses trembled in tiny concentric circles. Ethan glanced toward the musicians. They had stopped playing. The floor was vibrating. Barely. Too subtle for conversation to pause. Too regular to be structural settling. 3 pulses. Silence. 3 more. Something mechanical was operating below them. Ethan looked toward the palace security commander. "I need the sublevel schematics." The alien stared at him, then laughed. "You have been her protector for 30 seconds, human." Ethan watched another ripple cross the nearest glass. "Then I've already wasted 29. Across the chamber, Queen Valyra's amusement disappeared. Beneath their feet came one final vibration, so faint nobody else seemed to notice it. Ethan did, and whatever was moving below the palace had just stopped directly beneath the queen. By morning, Ethan Cole had learned 3 things about the Crystal Palace, and none of them made him feel better. The vibration beneath the throne room had been explained as an automated freight platform cycling through a restricted service tunnel. The palace security commander had delivered that explanation with the patient expression of a man speaking to someone who had mistaken thunder for artillery. Ethan had accepted the answer without argument. Then he had requested the maintenance logs. That ended the conversation. Now he walked 12 feet behind Queen Valyra through a corridor of translucent stone, while Aurelia Prime's pale sunrise spilled through windows stretching nearly 30 feet from floor to ceiling. Valyra moved with practiced calm, surrounded by 4 royal guards in silver armor. Ethan wore the same black security uniform as the night before. No ceremonial armor. No royal colors. Just a compact communications unit, a medical pouch, and a tablet containing the schedule he had already rewritten twice. "You changed my route," Valyra said without looking back. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Without permission." "Also yes." One guard glanced toward Ethan with open disbelief. Valyra stopped. Ethan stopped with her. "Humans have an interesting interpretation of employment," she said. Terran protective work has a simple interpretation of staying alive. Her silver eyes settled on him. Do you always expect catastrophe? No. I expect details. He lifted the tablet. Catastrophes usually announce themselves with details first. She studied him for another second, then continued walking. Their first appointment was in the Eastern Diplomatic Wing, but Ethan redirected the group through the Botanical Gallery. It added 300 yards to the trip. The guards complained. Veilira did not. She had begun watching him instead. Ethan noticed the first problem at 9:14 in the morning. Camera 12 lost its indicator light for 2.3 seconds as the Queen passed beneath it. The light returned immediately. No alarm sounded. At 9:27, a maintenance door opened ahead of them using the credentials of technician Howard Voss. Ethan checked the personnel database. Howard Voss had died 11 months earlier. At 9:41 came the third detail. A royal guard joined them outside the council chamber and reported completing a perimeter inspection through the Western Gardens. Ethan looked down. Rain had fallen there less than an hour earlier. The other guards carried traces of blue garden clay around their boots. This man's boots were spotless. Ethan stepped between him and Veilira. Identification. The guard stiffened. You have no authority to question me. Then answering should be easy. The corridor became quiet. Veilira turned. Is there a problem, Mr. Cole? 3, actually. Ethan explained the camera outage, the dead technician's credential, and the clean boots. The Royal Security Commander arrived minutes later and dismissed each concern separately. A software delay, an outdated credential archive, a guard who had changed footwear. Perfectly reasonable explanations. That bothered Ethan most. Real mistakes were messy. These were neat. Designed to close questions. Veilira dismissed the room and approached him after the others left. You distrust my security service. I distrust coincidences. And if you are wrong. Ethan looked through the window toward the ceremonial avenue where thousands would gather for tomorrow's treaty signing. Then everybody gets annoyed with the human. For the first time, Veilira almost smiled. And if you are right. Ethan changed tomorrow's evacuation route on his tablet and locked the file so only he could access it. Then being annoying might be the reason you are still here. Behind them, camera 12 went dark again. The treaty ceremony began beneath a ceiling of floating crystal, with 2,000 guests watching Queen Veilira cross the central platform toward the Terran delegation. Ethan Cole heard the danger before he saw it. A thin electrical whine rose somewhere above the music, almost too high for conversation to hide. He stopped walking. The royal guards continued forward. Veilira took another step. Ethan looked toward the eastern balcony. Nothing moved. No raised weapon. No suspicious figure. Just diplomats, banners, cameras, and sunlight pouring through 40-foot windows. Then the sound changed. A capacitor was charging. Down. Veilira turned toward him instead. Ethan crossed the distance and guided her behind the ceremonial podium just as a narrow flash crossed the space where she had been standing. It struck the decorative shield behind the platform, and the shield shut itself down with a sharp electronic crack. The hall went silent for half a heartbeat. Then alarms erupted. Royal guards surrounded the Queen. Guests rushed toward the marked evacuation doors. Ethan stayed low beside Veilira, scanning the balconies. Was that meant for me? She asked. Her voice was steady. Yes. How certain are you? Another electrical whine answered for him. Ethan looked toward the western wall. The first attack had not been the real problem. It had been the signal. Do not use the evacuation route. The security commander appeared through the confusion. The western corridor is secure. Move the Queen immediately. Ethan caught Veilira's arm before she could rise. No. The commander stared at him. Human, release her. Ethan ignored him. Across the hall, emergency doors were opening in perfect sequence, guiding everyone toward the western corridor. Too perfect. The route had been programmed before the alarm began. Yesterday, Ethan had changed Veilira's evacuation path and kept the revision private. Whoever controlled the palace still expected her to follow the original plan. Your Majesty, Ethan said quietly. Do you trust me for 60 seconds? Veilira looked at the security commander, then at the western doors. You have 45. Ethan led her through a narrow service entrance behind the ceremonial platform. 2 royal guards followed. The commander protested over the communications channel, ordering them back toward the official route. Ethan shut off his receiver. They had traveled less than 100 feet when a deep mechanical impact rolled through the palace behind them. The lights flickered. Somewhere along the western corridor, emergency barriers slammed shut. Valyra stopped. Her silver eyes widened as the palace system announced that the primary evacuation passage had been sealed by an unauthorized command. Hundreds of people had been redirected before reaching it, but the queen would have been inside the corridor when the barriers closed. Ethan looked at her. She understood. Someone knew royal protocol well enough to predict exactly where she would go. Someone had expected her guards to obey without hesitation. The service passage darkened as backup power engaged, painting Valyra's cyan skin in cold blue light. "You knew," she whispered. "I suspected. And you changed the route yesterday. That is why we are standing here." A new warning appeared on Ethan's tablet. Royal communications unavailable. Security network compromised. Internal access detected. He tried the Terran diplomatic channel. Nothing. The palace had become electronically silent. Valyra stared at the message, and something changed in her expression. The amused queen who had selected a human for entertainment was gone. "What happens now?" she asked. Ethan checked the manual door ahead. "Now we stop assuming the palace is protecting you." Behind them came the measured sound of footsteps entering the service corridor. Not running. Not confused. Coming directly toward them. Ethan switched off the corridor lights. "And your majesty," he whispered into the darkness. "From this moment forward, nobody knows where we are." The footsteps stopped 20 feet behind them. Ethan Cole raised one hand, and Queen Valyra understood enough to remain silent. The service corridor was completely dark now, except for a narrow green strip along the floor marking the emergency path. Air moved through exposed ventilation ducts overhead with a low metallic hum. Ethan listened. No voices. No hurried breathing. Whoever had followed them was waiting. That told him more than movement would have. He touched the manual release beside the next maintenance door and felt the mechanism resist. Electronic lockout. Expected. He removed a flat emergency tool from his belt and opened the mechanical access plate. Valyra watched him work. "There is another passage 30 feet ahead," she whispered. "Too obvious. This is my palace." "That is the problem." Her silver eyes hardened. "You are becoming remarkably comfortable ignoring me." Ethan turned the release wheel. "I am trying to keep you alive long enough to complain about it." The lock clicked. One of the two royal guards moved toward the opening, but Ethan stopped him. "You stay here. Both of you." The taller guard stared at him. "Our duty is to remain with the queen. Your armor is connected to the palace network." Valyra looked at the silver plates covering her guards. Tiny status lights pulsed along their collars. Ethan continued, "If the network is compromised, those suits are 400 pounds of tracking beacons." The guards exchanged uneasy looks. Valyra made the decision. "Disconnect and hold this corridor." They obeyed. Ethan opened the door just wide enough for Valyra to pass, followed her through, then closed it. Manually. The chamber beyond was an industrial service shaft descending beneath the ceremonial levels. Warm air smelled faintly of mineral coolant and heated metal. Pipes thicker than tree trunks disappeared into darkness below. Ethan checked his tablet. No signal. Good. For once, silence was useful. "Where are you taking me?" Valyra asked. "Away from every place your security manual says you should be. There is a royal shelter beneath the North Tower, which means whoever planned this knows about it. There is an armored transport bay on level 6. They know about that too." She stopped on the narrow stairway. "Then what exactly is your plan?" Ethan looked down through nearly 60 feet of machinery. "Become inconvenient." Valyra stared at him as though deciding whether human humor was a cultural defect. "That is not a plan. It has worked so far." A faint vibration traveled through the railing beneath Ethan's hand. 3 pulses. Silence. 3 more. The same pattern from the previous night. His expression changed. Valyra noticed immediately. "What is it?" "The freight system." Ethan descended another flight. The vibration under the throne room was not maintenance. Someone was testing movement through the sublevels. A red indicator illuminated ahead. Then another. Doors throughout the shaft began locking automatically. Ethan moved faster. Valyra followed. "They are sealing the lower levels." "Yes." "Then they know where we are." "Not exactly." Ethan reached a junction and pulled Valyra into a narrow thermal maintenance chamber seconds before the final door closed behind them. The room was barely 10 feet wide. Turbines murmured beyond the walls. Emergency lighting painted everything deep amber. For the first time in her reign, Veolyra stood without guards, advisors, cameras, or a functioning royal network. She looked at Ethan. "Stop calling me your majesty." He checked the chamber vents. "Why?" "Because titles are useless down here." Ethan finally met her eyes. "Good. Then we understand each other." "Do we?" "You are not my queen." Veolyra went completely still. Ethan pointed toward the sealed door as another distant vibration passed through the metal. "You are the person I was assigned to get home alive." For several seconds, only the turbines spoke. Then Veolyra asked the question without anger. "And what are you?" Ethan checked the fading battery indicator on his tablet. "Right now?" He listened as something heavy moved through the machinery outside. The reason they still have to keep looking. For the first time since the alarms began, nothing happened. No doors opened. No footsteps approached. No warning lights flashed. The thermal maintenance chamber simply breathed around them, its turbines producing a low mechanical rhythm that Ethan Cole could feel through the soles of his shoes. He preferred that sound to silence. Machines rarely lied about what they were doing. People were different. Queen Veolyra stood beneath the amber emergency light, while Ethan examined his left shoulder. The ceremonial shield had absorbed most of the earlier energy discharge, but a fragment from its damaged housing had torn through his uniform. The injury was shallow, more inconvenient than dangerous, yet the fabric had darkened enough for Veolyra to notice. "You are hurt." Ethan opened his medical pouch. "I have had worse mornings." "It is nearly noon." "Then I am having an excellent day." She did not smile. Ethan removed a sterile seal from the pouch and tried positioning it with one hand. The angle was awkward. After watching him struggle for several seconds, Veolyra stepped closer and held out her hand. "Give it to me." Ethan hesitated. "Have you used Terran medical equipment?" "I govern 17 inhabited worlds." "That was not my question." Her silver eyes narrowed. "Explain it." He handed her the seal. "Blue side against the uniform. Press for 5 seconds. It bonds through the fabric." Veolyra followed his instructions carefully. Her movements were precise, almost ceremonial. The seal tightened with a quiet hiss. Ethan tested his shoulder. "Better. Thank you." Veolyra looked at the small medical pouch. "That is all you carry?" "Enough to keep someone moving until proper help arrives." "Someone?" Her gaze settled on him. "You stepped between me and an unknown weapon without knowing whether your equipment could protect you." Ethan closed the pouch. There was no time to calculate everything. Aurelian guards are trained to calculate everything. "I noticed." The words could have sounded insulting. Somehow they did not. Veolyra turned toward the turbine wall. Amber light traced the edge of her cyan face. "Last night I chose you because the court was becoming unbearable." Ethan said nothing. "I wanted to embarrass Chancellor Sereth. I wanted to remind my commanders that their traditions were not sacred. And perhaps I wanted to see whether the famous human confidence survived being laughed at." "Did you reach a conclusion?" "Not yet." Ethan checked his belt. One compact emergency sidearm remained. Its power indicator showed a single usable charge. Veolyra noticed. One. She studied the weapon, then him. "If they capture us, is that intended for me?" The turbine seemed louder after the question. Ethan understood what she meant. He also understood the world that had taught her to ask it. He removed the sidearm, turned the grip toward her, and placed it carefully in her hand. "No." Veolyra stared at the weapon. "Then why give it to me?" "Because if they get past me, you should still have a choice." Something in her expression shifted. Not gratitude. Not yet. Something quieter. Ethan showed her the safety control and the emergency beacon built into the grip. "If you reach open ground, hold this for 3 seconds. Terran diplomatic receivers may detect it even if the palace network cannot." Veolyra closed her fingers around the weapon. "And what will you carry?" Ethan picked up a 12-inch maintenance wrench from beside the turbine housing, weighed it once in his palm, then tucked it through his belt. Veolyra looked at the wrench, then at him. "That is your plan?" "No." He moved toward an old service terminal embedded in the wall. Unlike the palace network, it used physical switches and a hardwired maintenance line. Dust covered the controls. Ethan wiped the screen clean. "This is..." The terminal flickered awake. Rows of archived freight records appeared. Veolyra stepped beside him. Ethan found the vibration pattern from the night before and traced its origin. Through the sublevels. His eyes stopped on one entry. The freight system had not carried equipment. It had carried 6 unidentified passengers into the palace 72 hours earlier using authorization from the Royal Security Council. Veolyra read the record twice. That is impossible. Ethan looked at the sealed door. No. His voice dropped. That is why everything has been so easy for them. Veolyra kept staring at the freight record as if refusing to blink might force it to become a mistake. 6 unidentified passengers. 72 hours earlier. Royal Security Council authorization. Ethan Cole copied the entry into the isolated memory of his tablet, then disconnected the maintenance terminal from its hardwired line. Who can issue that authorization? He asked. 7 counselors. Can your security commander? Not alone. Her voice had lost its royal certainty. Transport beneath the palace requires 3 approvals. Ethan looked at the screen again. Then either 3 people helped them, or somebody learned how to make the system believe they did. Veolyra paced once across the narrow chamber. Why bring infiltrators inside 3 days before the treaty ceremony? Preparation. For an assassination? Ethan shook his head. That part does not fit. Veolyra stopped. Someone tried to strike me in front of 2,000 witnesses. And missed twice. You moved me. The first time. Ethan brought up the ceremony layout from his offline files. But look at what happened afterward. The attack forced your guards to activate the official evacuation plan. That route would have put you inside a sealed corridor. No public cameras. No diplomats. No Terran observers. Veolyra slowly understood. They wanted me isolated. Ethan nodded. If killing you was the only objective, the ceremony offered easier opportunities. He searched the archived freight records by date. A second file appeared, older and partially corrupted. It contained a maintenance request for biometric equipment transferred to the North Tower. Veolyra leaned closer. Royal authorization hardware. What does it authorize? Emergency succession orders. Military commands. Treaty suspension. Transfers of executive authority. Ethan looked at her. Can anyone else activate it? Not while I am alive. The turbines hummed behind them. The shape of the plan finally emerged. Someone did not merely want a dead queen. Someone wanted a living queen placed in a room where nobody could see what she was being made to authorize. Ethan searched the maintenance archive again. One scheduling file had been deleted, but its timestamp remained. Here. Veolyra read it. 3 days from now. That was their original operational window. Then why today? Ethan did not answer immediately. He opened the palace security archive and found the recording from the previous evening. The image showed the Crystal Hall, the royal guards, the laughing nobles, and Veolyra pointing toward a human standing near the rear doors. Ethan slowed the footage. Most faces showed amusement. Chancellor Sereth looked irritated. The security commander looked embarrassed. One counselor did neither. An older Aurelian named Counselor Mailer turned toward another official the instant Veolyra selected Ethan. His expression changed for less than a second. Then he left the chamber. Ethan checked the timestamp. 7 minutes later, Camera 7 had shifted 4 degrees. 11 minutes later, the freight system beneath the throne room had activated. Veolyra went very still. Mailer has served my family for 31 years. Maybe he is involved. Maybe he only knows something. We do not have enough evidence yet. But my choosing you changed their schedule. Ethan replayed the moment once more. I think they planned around your own people. Your guards, your routes, your protocols, maybe even your reactions. He shut off the recording. Then you picked someone who was never supposed to be standing beside you. Veolyra looked at him, and for the first time there was no trace of amusement in her silver eyes. I chose the wrong bodyguard. Ethan listened to the turbines, the airflow, the distant machinery beyond the sealed chamber. Then he shook his head. No, you chose the one they could not predict. A soft tone sounded from the maintenance terminal. Ethan turned. Someone elsewhere in the palace had just attempted to access the same archived freight records. They were no longer the only ones searching for the truth. The access warning vanished after 4 seconds. Ethan Cole did not wait for it to return. He powered down the maintenance terminal, removed its physical data key, and slipped the key into his pocket. We move now. Veolyra tightened her grip on the emergency sidearm. Where? Somewhere they think we would never go. You have said that several times. It keeps being useful. Ethan opened a service map stored locally on his tablet. The lower palace contained ventilation trunks, water recycling lines, thermal exchangers, and gravity control equipment installed decades before the modern security network existed. Most royal personnel ignored those systems because machines handled them automatically. Ethan saw something else. Options. He pointed toward a junction roughly 200 yards away. Gravity distribution room. Veolyra studied the map. That section is restricted. Perfect. They left the chamber through a manual maintenance hatch and entered a narrow passage where warm pipes ran along both walls. Ethan moved quickly but quietly. His injured shoulder protested whenever he climbed, so he used his right arm and kept moving. At the first intersection, he stopped. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead. Maintenance teams. Veolyra whispered. Ethan touched the pipe beside him. Cold. Not with the thermal system running this hot. He guided her through a side hatch and into the gravity distribution room. The space was nearly 50 feet long, filled with cylindrical regulators and old mechanical controls. Ethan's expression changed. Finally. Finally what? A system old enough to be trustworthy. He found the manual gravity controls and lowered the setting in the corridor outside to 12% of normal Aurelian gravity. Then he increased the ventilation fans and redirected coolant vapor through an unused maintenance duct. Veolyra watched the controls change. You are turning my palace into a machine. Ethan glanced at her. It was always a machine. A warning light appeared above the corridor door. Someone had entered the section. Ethan activated 2 maintenance drones and sent them in opposite directions, each carrying a copied signal from his tablet. Seconds later, tracking indicators split across the display. Whoever was searching for them now had 3 possible targets. You are not fighting them, Veolyra said. No. Why? Ethan adjusted another valve. Because fighting is what they prepared for. Your palace guards know every defensive procedure in this building. Whoever planned this probably knows them too. He opened a service route toward the eastern transit level. So we do something boring. Boring. We leave. They moved through the low-gravity corridor. Behind them came surprised voices as the altered gravity disrupted the search team's formation. Ethan did not look back. At the next junction, they found 6 palace employees trapped behind an emergency partition. Kitchen workers, 2 technicians, and an elderly archivist. Veolyra stared at them. The eastern transit level is the opposite direction. I know. Ethan began turning the manual release wheel. Every minute matters. I know that too. Then why stop? Ethan pulled harder until the mechanism released. Because they are here. The partition opened. He pointed the workers toward a safe maintenance stairwell and handed the archivist his spare emergency beacon. Nobody thanked him. There was no time. Veolyra simply watched. Once the civilians disappeared, she followed Ethan into the transit tunnel. Aurelian protection doctrine prioritizes the sovereign. Terran doctrine prioritizes whoever needs the door opened. That is inefficient. Ethan almost smiled. Usually, they reached an observation platform overlooking the palace docking level. Below, an armored royal shuttle waited with its engines active. It should have been their escape. Instead, Ethan counted 4 unfamiliar figures positioned around it. Waiting, Veolyra whispered. They knew. Ethan studied the docking bay, then the maintenance controls beside him. Pressure regulation, fire suppression, cargo doors, gravity plating, thermal sensors. Everything connected. Everything ordinary. Everything useful. He removed the maintenance wrench from his belt and set it beside the control panel. Good. Veolyra looked at him. Good. Ethan began rerouting the docking bay systems manually. I am tired of being the one who is surprised. Ethan waited until the 4 figures below moved closer to the royal shuttle. Then he touched the first control. The docking bay lights went dark. A second control lowered gravity to 18%. A third released harmless coolant mist from the maintenance vents, filling the floor with a pale white haze that confused the thermal sensors without endangering anyone. Veolyra watched the tracking display as 4 signals scattered. They cannot see us. Neither can the automated security system, Ethan said. That matters more. He sent 1 maintenance drone rolling across the opposite cargo lane, carrying his copied identification signal. 2 figures followed it immediately. Ethan activated a freight door between them and the shuttle. The heavy partition descended with a hydraulic groan, separating the docking level into sections. Another drone transmitted Veolyra's old evacuation code from a service elevator. The remaining figures moved toward it. Ethan nodded. Now, They descended the maintenance stairs and crossed the docking bay while emergency lights pulsed through the coolant mist. The Royal Shuttle waited less than 100 feet away. Veolyra reached the boarding ramp first. Ethan stopped beside the external control panel. Something was wrong. The shuttle's engines were active, but the navigation computer displayed a destination already entered. North Tower. He stared at it. They did not prepare this shuttle for escape. Veolyra understood immediately. They prepared it to transport me. A voice came through the docking bay speakers. Your Majesty, this has gone far enough. Counselor Mailer. Veolyra's face became still. You serve my father, and I am trying to preserve what he built. The Terran Treaty will weaken the Dominion. Come to the North Tower voluntarily. Authorize the emergency transfer, and this ends peacefully. Ethan looked at Veolyra. There it was. Confirmation. Not an assassination. A forced succession hidden inside a security crisis. You have your evidence, Ethan whispered. We need to get it outside the palace. He activated the shuttle's emergency transmitter, but the signal died instantly. Communications remained blocked. Mailer spoke again. The human cannot protect you forever. Ethan studied the docking controls. He is right. Veolyra turned sharply. That is an unusual thing for you to admit. I am running out of palace. He pointed toward a service lift connecting the docking level to an external communications platform. That antenna has a direct Terran diplomatic channel. If you reach it, transmit the freight records and Mailer's statement. If I reach it. Ethan pressed the lift control. You are leaving. And you? I keep their attention here. Veolyra did not move. That is an order? A suggestion. You ignore mine. You are learning. The lift doors opened. Ethan handed her his tablet containing the copied evidence. Go. Veolyra stepped inside. For 1 second, neither spoke. Then the doors closed between them. Ethan turned back toward the docking bay and activated every maintenance drone he could access. 12 signals appeared across the tracking display, all broadcasting variations of his identification code. He redirected ventilation, cycled cargo partitions, and opened empty service elevators on 3 different levels. The palace became noisy with false information. Then the control panel flashed red. Someone had overridden his access. Ethan tried another command. Denied. Another. Denied. Mailer was taking the systems back one by one. Ethan reached for the maintenance wrench, but his injured shoulder finally refused the movement. He caught himself against the console and breathed slowly. Above him, the service lift reached the communications platform. Veolyra stood before the external transmitter with freedom only a few steps away. The Terran channel appeared. Open. She could send the evidence, summon help, and leave the palace through the diplomatic landing deck. Instead, she looked at Ethan's tablet. One palace system remained outside Mailer's control. The ancient Royal Defense Network, isolated behind biometric authorization that only the sovereign could activate. Veolyra placed her hand against the scanner. Royal identity confirmed, the system announced. Awaiting command. She looked toward the lift. Aurelian doctrine was clear. The sovereign survived. Guards remained behind. That was the rule Ethan had refused to follow from the beginning. Veolyra opened the Terran channel, transmitted the evidence, and activated the palace defense lockdown. Then she pressed the lift control. Down. In the docking bay, Ethan heard the machinery change. Doors unlocked. Communications returned. Royal security systems began isolating unauthorized personnel without harming them. He looked toward the lift as its doors opened. Veolyra stepped out through the thinning white mist. Ethan stared at her. I told you to go. You told me I was not your queen. She walked toward him, silver eyes steady. So I decided not to behave like one. 3 weeks later, the Crystal Hall sounded different. Ethan Cole noticed that before anything else. The same climate vents whispered beneath the glass-like floor. The same suspended crystals scattered blue-white light across the chamber. The same diplomatic banners hung between the 40-foot windows. But nobody laughed. Ethan stood near the rear doors in a formal black Terran uniform, his left shoulder fully healed except for a stiffness he noticed on cold mornings. Across the hall, Chancellor Sereth read the final report before representatives from Earth and the Aurelian Dominion. Counselor Mailer and the officials who had supported his plan had been removed from authority pending public trial. The freight records, authorization logs, communications archive, and Mailer's own statement had survived because Veolara had transmitted them beyond the palace before returning for Ethan. No executions followed. Veolara had refused them. A government proves its strength by what it protects, she had told the council, not by how quickly it punishes. The treaty with Earth had been signed 4 days later. Now another ceremony waited. 12 Aurelian warriors stood before the throne in polished silver armor. Each had decades of service. Each had passed the Royal Protector examination. Tradition required Veolara to select. 1. Ethan had already requested reassignment to the Terran embassy. His work here was finished. At least, that was what he had told himself. Queen Veolara rose from the throne. Her cyan skin caught the crystalline light as she descended the steps. She passed the first warrior, then the second, then all 12. Confusion moved quietly through the chamber. Ethan felt it approaching before he understood why. Veolara kept walking, straight toward the rear doors. Straight toward him. She stopped 3 feet away. Mr. Cole, Your Majesty. A faint expression touched her face. You started calling me that again. The emergency is over. So it is. Chancellor Sereth stepped forward. Your Majesty, tradition requires the Royal Protector to be Aurelian. Veolara turned slightly. Tradition also required me to use the Western evacuation corridor. Silence filled the hall. Sereth lowered his eyes. Veolara faced Ethan again. An attendant approached carrying a small silver emblem shaped like an 8-pointed star. Veolara took it herself. Ethan looked at the emblem, then at her. I am not Aurelian. I noticed. I do not know half your court protocols. That may be one of your strongest qualifications. Several diplomats tried not to smile. Veolara raised the emblem. The first time I selected you, I believed I was making a point about human confidence. Ethan remained still. You were making a joke. Yes. Her answer carried no embarrassment, only honesty. And while everyone laughed, you were watching the cameras. You noticed the floor. You questioned what my own people had stopped questioning. She attached the emblem above his Terran security badge. A quiet metallic click echoed between them. When danger came, you did not ask whether I deserved protection. When strangers needed help, you did not ask whether they were important. When escape was available, you gave me the choice instead of making it for me. Ethan looked down at the silver star. That sounds inconvenient. This time Veolara smiled. Extremely. She stepped back. Ethan Cole, I choose you as Royal Protector. No applause came immediately. That made the moment feel more real. One by one, the 12 Aurelian warriors placed closed hands over their hearts. Chancellor Sereth followed. Then the diplomats. Then the palace staff standing along the walls. Ethan looked across the chamber and noticed camera 7 above the diplomatic gallery. It pointed exactly where it should. Veolara followed his gaze. Neither of them said anything. They did not need to. The first time she had chosen him, she had wanted the room to laugh. The second time, the room had learned why humans were worth taking seriously.